Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I know we haven't had a 4 to 5 show in a while. So for those of you who are new, welcome. We're happy you're here. And for those of you who are returning viewers, thank you for coming again. We have a few more 4 to 5 shows lined up. So keep a lookout for those. And let's dive into what we're talking about today, which is using AI to optimize conditional access policies. So this is where we'll learn how to improve and enhance your conditional access policies, identify coverage drift, and even discover policies that are causing spikes in sign-in failures. And so with that, I'm just going to pass it on to my teammate Jeff here, who is going to run through this presentation. If you have questions, I will be helping answer in the Q&A, and we'll also do a little bit of Q&A at the end. Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Bley. I'm part of the Identity and Network Access Customer Experience Engineering team at Microsoft. And what that means is I'm just the customer-facing side of the really smart people, the engineers and the product managers who are designing and building these great solutions. But I try to be the advocate of the customer. When customers actually get their hands on this and test it, I try to sort of accumulate that feedback and represent that back to the feature team so that we can make the product better, because no one builds a tool just for a tool's sake. We want it to actually solve a problem. So that's the cool kind of stuff that I do. And being on the identity team, I've been focusing primarily on global secure access, but I've also been partnering with some of our engineering folks specifically on this conditional access optimization agent. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, the Conditional Access Optimization Agent was released, I think, back in July, as far as when it went generally available. And some of the things as to why we wanted to build this agent is that the conditional access is sort of a core zero trust engine, shall we say, in terms of securing your environment. And I remember when this first was released, like in public preview, I had a vendor come up to me and say, boy, you know, there are customers whose, if your job is not conditional access, then this is very confusing to be able to look at 50 to 100 policies, understand what is happening and why things are configured the way they are. And the North Star is, well, we've got internally one of our very smart architects. His name is Tarek. He leads the architecture team. And so if we could, we thought if we could put a Tarek in a box and ship it as a product, that someone that could sort of be a partner in helping you design and make your conditional access policies, like that's sort of the North Star. We're not quite there yet, but we're certainly on our way. Now, some of the problems that we are trying to address is the fact that identity-based attacks are just going up. There's no sign of stopping, and the fact that artificial intelligence is now on the playing field, there's just going to be a lot more real estate that all of us identity and security experts are going to need to defend. So why not leverage AI as part of that defense? As far as some additional considerations of the landscape, the fact that identities are going up and applications are going up, it's far too easy to miss something, especially with a constantly evolving landscape with users coming and going, applications constantly being onboarded. And as you can see here, 71% of organizations think that it's just going to increase in the next 12 months. I don't know when this survey was conducted, but all the trends are kind of in our against us. We're certainly leaning into the wind as far as what security experts have to defend. And the main problem is that manual policy management doesn't scale well. Yes, you can build automation, you can build rules and PowerShell scripts and whatnot, but as soon as the environment changes, then you have to go and update all of the automation you put around it. It's very rigid, whereas AI is much more flexible. So that's one of the reasons why we're sort of leveraging a AI and LLM based solution to address this problem. So what are the quote unquote promises of the CA optimization agent? Well, the goal is to uncover security gaps, be able to fix these gaps with maybe not one click, but as few clicks as possible, and stay secure as the environment around you changes. So as far as what the agent kind of looks like and what it does, we have the agent inputs on the left, which of course it looks at the existing conditional access policies themselves. It looks at audit logs to identify new users and apps and identify that drift. There's some custom instructions, and there's some additional insights and signals that we leverage as well. And the goal is to output tailored suggestions for your environment and help you be able to sleep at night, honestly, and not be worried constantly about the gaps that you might not be aware of. And with that, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, so I'm now pretty much done with PowerPoint, and the rest of what we're going to be showing is going to be a live demo. So cross your fingers and pray to the demo gods, and we'll see how this goes. But this is one of our internal environments, and this is what the Conditional Access Optimization Agent looks like at a glance. So you can see at the very top, there's the agent summary. Now this is obviously a lab environment, so no one's really done a lot in here. 0 suggestions and so on, but it has identified 117 new users and 63 new applications. Overall, its suggestions would have, if applied, they would have covered and added protection to 174 users and 1,973 apps. And in the last 30 days, the SCUs used have been 5.43. That's actually a good place I should have perhaps started with. To use this, you need Security Copilot, which requires some sort of sign up to have at least one SCU provisioned in your tenant. And that's what allows all of this to run. But the CA agent itself, as you can see down here, these are sort of per run. It's very minimal SCU usage. So if you just want to evaluate this agent, you won't necessarily need to provision a lot. Some of the agents are a bit more SCU intensive, but we're always looking to optimize those over time. So with that in mind, I think the best way for me to show kind of what this agent is doing is to look at what we call the node map. So this is the run that ran yesterday at 2:30 p.m. I'm going to click view activity. Oh boy. Let's hit refresh here. Okay, looks like a refresh took care of it. Live demos, you never know what you're going to see. So you can see right off the bat, we have a natural language summary of what the agent did, but I'm just going to go ahead and collapse that and sort of show you, this is sort of the thought process of what did the agent evaluate and look at during the run. So we'll kind of zoom in here so it's actually readable. But the first two are policy app drift and policy user drift. So it's looking at new users and apps that have been created in the last 24 hours that may or may not be protected by some baseline policies. So for apps, we just want to make sure they're at least protected by one policy. And for users, we want to make sure that they are, for example, have a policy that requires MFA, some kind of device control, whether that's hybrid joined or compliant device, making sure that device code flow is restricted, for example, legacy authentication, etc. Now, in this case from yesterday, we found that all the applications are covered, which is great. So no recommendations were generated. And of the 28 users that were evaluated, there are 2 recommendations in terms of, hey, these are some additional coverages that we might want to add these users to. Moving down the line, we have policy merge. This is looking at the policies to find opportunities to consolidate and maybe combine redundant or overlapping policies. So the way this logic is, it says, if there are two policies that I can safely combine that will not change any access requirements, then I will generate a suggestion. It actually will either suggest creating or just create a report only mode policy for you, depending on whether or not you have a certain checkbox checked or not. And by putting it in report only mode, that allows it to immediately start generating some information, some telemetry, so you can analyze, see what the impact would be if I enable it. And of course, then you can turn it on and get rid of the old policies. Now, also covered up here, I believe in the policy user drift, it looks for missing baseline policies. So if you have no policy at all that requires MFA, that blocks legacy authentication, etc., it might suggest saying, "Hey, let's go ahead and create one. You're missing a key scenario here, so let's go ahead and turn it on, or at least enable it in report only mode." And after you let it run a while, get the warm fuzzies, and now you want to actually turn it on and roll it out to your users. We have, when the agent was first released, it was big bang. You accept the suggestion, and now it's on for all your users. But of course, in reality, no admin really wants to do a big bang deployment. So we have this thing called phased rollout. When you click accept this recommendation, it will then sort of walk you through and say, all right, first of all, let's identify the 5 rings of the deployment. So it makes its best guess to pick some groups, but allows you obviously to say, no, I know what groups should be in ring 0, ring 1, ring 2, etc. So you can edit that. You define a period of time between 1 and 14 days, and that's the time between when it moves from ring 1 to ring 2, for example, and all the rings. And yeah, it basically automates the rollout for you. And if the success rate ever dips below, I believe, 90%, then it will actually stop the rollout, kick it back, and then you have the fun job of maybe doing some data analysis as to why before you kick it off and try again. Maybe you need to make some adjustments to the conditional access policy, add some exclusions, etc., before trying the rollout again. We have what is called deep analysis. This name does not necessarily represent what it's actually looking for, but at the moment it's looking at 2 specific scenarios, which is CA policies with too many exclusions and CA policies with no exclusions, meaning there's no break glass accounts excluded when all of your policies really should have them excluded just in case. Even if it's just a group-based include, I still recommend excluding the break glass accounts just in case someone accidentally maybe puts a break glass account into a group that's included. You just want to mitigate any possible accidental inclusion like that. So what would the outcome of this look like? It would say, hey, there's 1,000 users excluded from this policy. That's kind of high. And it's not necessarily going to generate a one-click fix, but it is going to raise this as something that should be reviewed. And ultimately, the outcome will be you open up a checkbox and you say, and you mark it as reviewed. Whether that was, yes, everything here is a service account, this exclusion is anticipated and fully expected, then great. You mark it as reviewed and we're done. Or it'll be, we've actually discovered something new or unexpected, and therefore you can take actions and maybe kick some people out of that exclusion group. And the same is true for break glass accounts. If you identify a policy that has nothing excluded, it'll walk you through a process of adding those break glass accounts to make sure that you're fully covered. We have a sort of broader category, which is called zero trust gap analysis, and I fully expect this to add more and more scenarios over time. But as of today, or at least the run from yesterday, we have some in-tune scenarios looking at app protection policies and device compliance policies. Now, on the in-tune side, admins might create an app protection policy or some policy that says for a device to be considered compliant, it must meet these criteria. But if you just make those policies, you're not actually protecting any resources. It requires a conditional access policy to actually enforce that check before we issue a token for a specific resource. And so what this does is it looks for any kind of mismatches to say, hey, you've got a compliance policy over here, but you're missing the CA policy that actually makes it do anything. So there have been customers that I've worked with that this had some findings. You just never know until you sort of run the agent for the first time and see what shows up. This is similarly related, looking at the app protection policies and device compliance covering the supported platforms. And then this one was just recently added, I think just a week or two ago. But if we see that you're using Global Secure Access or GSA, one of the baseline policies that we would recommend is a compliant network check. And so this will see if that's required at all. And if you're missing that sort of baseline policy, we would then suggest it. And last but not least, and I think this is something that everyone would be interested in my opinion, is the conditional access policy impact analysis. Now, what this does, it looks at, first of all, only your policies that are actually enabled, none of your off or report only mode policies. And it looks at some of the sign-in risk, or not, I'm sorry, not the sign-in risk, but the sign-in failures. And it looks at the historical pattern. You know, if you were to see this in a graph, see your ebbs and flows. You know, Monday at 9 a.m. everyone's signing in, and then maybe around 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. it kind of dies down. You'll see those spikes and those the dips. But if there's suddenly a very large spike over time, that's a bit unusual. It basically looks and establishes the baseline of what's normal for this policy. And if there's a spike, it highlights it for you. And so since I'm now done with the node map here, I'm actually gonna pop out back to the overall. Oh, because I hit refresh, it didn't take me to where I was originally. Let's go to conditional access and back to the agent. So now let's find one of these suggestions. And let's just take a look and sort of show what it might look like. So here, review increase in failed sign-ins by CA15 admins require phishing resistant MFA. Let's go ahead and review this. Here's where I can say mark it as reviewed. I could also snooze it. But let's go ahead and click into this report. Oh my, a sign-in failure rate increased by 802%. This is unusual. It does attempt to give us sort of a root cause analysis. It says, now this is something that we're working on fixing. We take a sample of the data. And so while it says one user, it's probably not just one user that's causing this spike. This is something that we hope to improve. I think if I click this one user, yeah, there's some things that need to be improved here. But if I go back to that report, you can see it says this is what we think is the cause. These are some non-factors, some things that we can probably rule out as to what might be an explanation for this. And it also goes over some potential next steps. But again, this is not necessarily a one-click remediation. It gives you some information that you can then do a little bit more research in before determining what the appropriate next step is going to be. Maybe this is actually blocking a attack. Maybe there's someone who's trying to hammer your account. And so yes, it's a spike in failure rates, but it's actually good. And that's okay. If it does turn out to be a false positive, then it is what it is. But the fact that you have this visibility, I think is still a win regardless. Now, a couple other things I will highlight. we had some early inputs that having the CA agent be the primary driver of the actual changes was not so good. There, especially banks and other companies that are in highly regulated industries, they have very strict change management processes. So there are two things that came about this. Number one, if you go to settings, there is this checkbox here, which, by the way, you'll have the option to check this box or not when you first onboard the agent. Because after you onboard the agent, it does trigger the first run as well. So if you don't want the agent to autonomously create policies in report-only mode, you can turn this off. No problem. It'll just make suggestions that, hey, you should create this policy in report-only mode. And then the subsequent suggestion, it will be, now let's enable this and get a phased rollout plan going. So that was the first change that came. And the second one was an integration with ServiceNow. So a lot of companies use ServiceNow for their change management process. So why not integrate these recommendations into your existing change management process? So if I click this review suggestion, there is this option here that says open a ticket. Now, in this lab environment, I don't have access to ServiceNow. So if I open the ticket, it's just going to take me to this, essentially the sign-in page. But assuming that you have single sign-on, you would land at a ticket submission with several of the fields automatically filled out by the agent. But once you submit that ticket, it'll go through whatever process you have, and when it's approved, the agent will detect essentially that it's approved, and then apply the change. So it ties in very nicely to your existing change management processes. For any of these recommendations, I will also point out that there's this policy impact slide, which gives you some of the data. I have heard mixed reviews about how useful this particular graph is, but this is just the standard. This is the same graph you would see if you're looking at the this policy in the conditional access portal itself. And of course, of these users and groups, you can always download the JSON. You can chat with the agent if you wanted to ask it more information. Like, tell me, a little bit more about this. What's gonna happen if I accept this recommendation, etc. At the very top level, you can actually also hit chat with agent, and you can even say, hey, there's a bunch of recommendations. Where should I start? Please help me prioritize this. Let's see. I feel like I've covered most of everything. Maybe one other thing that is worth mentioning is that Teams notifications are now also live. So you can go to settings and make some configurations to say, who do I want to send some Teams messages to, so that when the agent runs, it finds something that needs to be reviewed, and then the agent can just reach out to the user directly to let them know. And probably the last thing worth mentioning is the custom instructions. And this is a bit limited in terms of what it supports. The main scenario is that this is where you would want to identify these are my break glass accounts. So it can just give that agent that information up front rather than the agent trying to make its best guess. But this is going to evolve in the next coming quarters to be a bit more flexible. And with that, I think that's really everything I would want to highlight and showcase about the conditional access agent. I will point out that I've worked with a lot of customers, even from the early days, when it was not as feature-rich as it is today. It has come a long way, and I'm very excited about what it holds in the future. I'll keep those details to myself because this is a public forum and it's under NDA. But I'm excited in terms of I will give you a hint that we're planning some changes to make the agent more aware of your environment so that it can make more accurate suggestions and maybe be aware that, you've got 3 MFA policies, one for admins, one for guests, and one for employees, and therefore be aware of your logic and be able to make suggestions that put the right users in the right policies, as well as give you some better gap analysis. So that's all I'll say as for what's coming in the coming months and what we're working on. And I think with that, let's go ahead and see if there's any questions in the queue, shall we?
Yes, there's quite a few, which is very exciting. So we'll start. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. We'll start with the first one that came up is actually a couple questions around this. Is this available in GCC High or government tenants yet?
I don't believe it is, but that's primarily because Security Copilot is not there in the GCC tenants yet. So when Security Copilot as the platform is available, then we can start adding the various agents in there as well.
All right, I think that's a good segue into this next question from John. It says, since Security Copilot is quite expensive for smaller companies, can we export the conditional access policy to a JSON file and have M365 Copilot analyze it? But my understanding is we need Security Copilot to run the CA agent. Is that correct?
That is correct. You do need Security Copilot for this particular agent. But to your point, if you wanted to build your own agent or export the data and then feed it to an LLM and say, give me an analysis of it, there's nothing really stopping you from doing that. But obviously there's going to be a lot more native integrations, and doing this securely, I think, is also a big benefit of using the native agent. If you build your own solution, you're going to have to secure your own solution and manage your own solution. So yes, I fully acknowledge that Security Copilot is not cheap necessarily, and I hope that gets better. But I'm unfortunately not the person who makes those decisions.
Yeah, very true. There's a couple questions around cost. Let's go to the next one. Does this only work for devices that are Entra joined, or will also work on only AD joined machines too?
This is currently living in Entra ID. So anything that is in Entra ID, the agent can, at least hypothetically, see it, analyze it, evaluate it. But if it's only on Active Directory, the agent does not have any visibility into there, so it can't generate insights based on what it can't see.
Makes sense. Let's see, next one here. How often do you recommend having this agent run? Once per hour, per day, per week?
Currently, it is running once a day, and that's where it sort of does the drift analysis to say, all right, since the last time I checked, what are the new users and apps that have been onboarded that we need to take a look at? Now, I wouldn't necessarily run this every hour. There are some additional capabilities and scenarios that we may introduce in the future that would want, like, there would actually be some value in running it more frequently than once a day. But for now, what's there is fine as the defaults.
Okay, and this kind of segues into this next question is how many SCUs would be required to have this feature work? And I believe you did show that there was a chart which showed each run and how much SCUs were being used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this does depend on the size of your environment, but I would say for most organizations, just to kick the tires on it, you can start with one. And if you need more, you can always increase it. One's the minimum. So I think as far as the agents go, the CA agent is the most efficient agent we've released yet.
And then there's another one, any costs associated with this like SCUs from Security Copilot? Yes, that question. Yes. All of that answers that question as well. Okay, on to a different topic. Any plans to have it recommend the CA naming standards based on the previously published MS best practices?
Ooh, interesting. I know that we've had for years now, at least 6 or 7 years since I've been on this team, the recommendation that you should have a naming convention and a naming standard for your policies. I am unfamiliar with the fact that there is an official, like, you should name your policies this way. I've only seen ideas and suggestions of maybe this is a way you could do it, not necessarily that there's a recommended way. So I'm going to do some research into that. But yeah, I think that would be a low-hanging fruit to say, agent, also look at the naming convention and make some suggestions on how this can be improved. So good feedback, good idea. I like it.
Right. And there's a couple questions around the ServiceNow part of your demo. Is ServiceNow the only provider that is integrated with the agent? And if not, how do we tie in ticketing platforms to the agent, if possible?
For now, it is the only one. I don't know if they can put in the chat, but I'd be interested in what they're using. If they could tell us what they'd like us to do next, we could take a look at potentially expanding it to additional vendors.
Yeah, see, John, I think you asked that question, John Gardner. If you can reply to your own comment, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see, next question here. Particular creation, no, you answered that. There's so many coming in, guys. I love this, thank you. What is the report only mode? Can you detail a little bit more on the feature regarding the automation of creation of new policies?
Sure. So I don't think I have one that I can show you in this lab environment. But, and again, this depends on this particular checkbox, this one. So let's say I've unchecked the box. That means the agent is not going to create any policies unless I explicitly click a button or say so. So what does that mean? Well, let's say it identifies that you are missing a policy that blocks legacy authentication. It will then generate a recommendation saying, hey, let's create a policy that targets all users and blocks legacy authentication and put it in report only mode. Now, I assume it's not a good assumption. I've been assuming that everyone on this call is familiar with conditional access, but if that is not the case, I will do a quick level set that you can put a conditional access policy in one of 3 modes: off, which just means it's there, does nothing; on, which means it's actively being evaluated, that if you protect Office 365 with a policy that requires MFA, then the user must do MFA before we grant them access and give them a token. But there's this middle ground, which is report only mode, which basically means when they come and sign in, I'm just going to log what would have happened had this been on. And so it runs essentially in a listening mode or a report only mode. And with the data from the sign-in logs, you can then look at over a week or a month, whatever period of time that you want to evaluate, to identify what is the impact going to be if I would have had this on. And that will hopefully guide your decision into how you're going to roll it out to be in the on mode. So once you accept that recommendation, it will then create that policy in report only mode, starts analyzing the data, and the next suggestion is going to be, all right, let's turn this on and roll it out. Now, you should not do this like in a period of 1 day. You should not turn it on in report only mode, look at 1 day's worth of data, and then start rolling it out. Do your due diligence and let it run the minimum amount of time that you feel good about. Hey, this shouldn't have a big impact, or if it will, I will know who to exclude or what to exclude to mitigate that impact. Then you will click the suggestion that says, let's turn this on. It will walk you through setting up those 5 phases or waves. And there is a bug in the UX. There's supposed to be a slider here that lets you say between 1 and 14 days. That should be fixed in the next week or two. But then kick off the phased rollout, and the policy will then be added to whatever group you identify for the first ring. Let's say 7 days later, we add the second group, and so on until the 5th wave is just going to be all users. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we have time for a few more questions. Let's see where this one. I see this has a chat with the agent menu option. What does this do?
Yes. So the chat with agent, I haven't fiddled with this since we first released it. I know we've made it better in the last couple weeks, but initially it was primarily for actually what I see here as the suggested, hey, can you give me an assessment of my conditional access policies? Can you help me organize or prioritize maybe I get 10 suggestions and it's like, well, where do I start? You can ask the agent to help you through that. You can also ask it for additional information about a specific recommendation. Please explain to me what this is actually saying or trying to do. Now, there's going to be additional improvements to the chat over time, but primarily this is going to be how you interact with the agent. There might even be some memory introduced here, so it'll remember all the conversations and keep the context and learn and get better over time.
Great, thank you. Well, then, let's see, the next question I had in mind here. Thank you, everyone, for your interactions. This is awesome. What is the minimum PIM role needed to access the CA Optimization Agent console?
Ooh, that's a good question, but hopefully not one that will be relevant for much longer. Watch for some exciting announcements around identities for AI at Ignite in a couple weeks. But you're absolutely right. For now, when you spin up the agent, it runs under the context of a user. And so that user has to have some minimum roles. Now, out of the box, it's going to be security admin or global admin. If you are willing to click a few more buttons, and if you go to the Security Copilot portal, you can give access to the conditional access admin for Security Copilot as well. I think it's not there by default. So conditional access admin is the least privileged role needed to run this, but you do have to give that role access to Security Copilot for it to work.
Okay. Next one, what would it look like? Oh, sorry. Would this look at conditional access policies for guest users and external users?
Yes, but I am 99% sure that we've done the due diligence to exclude guest accounts from policies that it wouldn't make sense. Like you wouldn't enforce a compliant device on a guest account when 99% of the organizations I've worked with don't issue devices to their external users. They're just trying to share a document with them most of the time. But for things like MFA and things where it would make sense, yes.
Okay. Analyze the scenarios. Let's see. Let's do another question. I'm interested in CA policies that control what happens to a user login based on user risk and sign-in risk. For example, like forcing password reset or requiring MFA. Is there anything more that you can speak on this? How might this agent analyze these scenarios and make suggestions for changes?
So it does look at and possibly suggest creation of risk-based conditional access policies. This has it's primarily looking to make sure that you're covered there, because from a conditional access policy perspective, it's not really doing the risk analysis. Like, that's identity protection. But what we want to see is that, do you have a policy that does something for sign-in risk and does something for risky users? The standard recommendation is that for sign-in risk, you should prompt for MFA with the sign-in frequency set for every time. And for user risk, you should block or force a password change for high user risk users. And the agent will make those suggestions if you don't have policies like that, assuming you have the P2 license.
Okay. Thank you. And then let's make this our last question. I apologize if we did not get to your question, everyone. There were so many coming in, but I wanted to bring this up just in case people wanted to demo this. So the first part I think has been answered. Can you please provide ballpark numbers around what this might cost in POC and what this might cost to run in production? Alternatively, curious on what your demo work would cost if you were in customer working in a lab. So Jeff, could you talk about how they could demo this and what it would cost if they did use a lab? If you can talk to that, or does it vary too much?
I'm gonna get in trouble for answering this one.
No worries. Then let's not.
No, it's okay. I won't actually get in trouble. But if you provision a single SCU, that's all that's needed to really kick the tires on this. Now, the default rate, I believe, is $4 per SCU per hour. So I think someone did the math one time, and it's like if you just let it run all the time for a month, that's like $3,000 for a month. But in a lab environment, and I've done this in my personal lab where I've got a subscription with some monthly allotment of credits. I might provision an SCU, work on it for an hour or two, and then deprovision the SCU. So I could charge $4 or $8. Now, I'm always paranoid if I do this, because if I forget, then I get a big bill. So I like set alarms and timers and stuff. But ultimately, I think it's of greater value for you to try it, even if you're doing it this roundabout way, which I'm certain no Microsoft account team that wants to ultimately sell the value is going to want you to do, for monetary reasons. But I would rather have you try it, and if you see there's value in it, then you go through the procurement, or if you have some allotment for POCs, go through the proper channels and get whatever the bill is going to be, get that approved, and do it the right way, the right way.
Great. Thanks for answering that. I know that's a little tricky, but a lot of questions around cost, which is understandable. Yes, but we are going to close this session out, and I want to thank everyone for coming, participating, asking questions. I apologize for not getting to all of them today, but we appreciate you being here. And thank you, Jeff, so much. I love, especially for being in the hot seat, answering all these questions. We appreciate it. And we'll see all of you next time. Keep a lookout, because there are a couple more 425 shows in the books. All right. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.